Believe we are now live, David.
We are live.
Since we are live, let's talk about what we're going to do today. Because the trade deadline has come and gone, and the Maple Leafs stand pat after the Mark Giordano deal on Sunday. Was that good enough? Well, let's talk about it and get into some of the other moves made on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother from TSN's Overdrive, as well as TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, my co-host, is Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also a writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast from. You can now catch us on video on YouTube. That's Locked On Leafs. And, well, we're doing our first live, Dave. Today is our first live. And I thought, well, this is probably a pretty good day to do it because it was a very, very special day on the NHL calendar. The NHL trade deadline has come and it has gone. And the Maple Leafs did diddly squat on Monday. They traded away Alex Biega, technically, created a contract slot, but they did not make any additional improvements. The goaltending situation got even murkier after Harry Sateri got claimed off of waivers by the Arizona Coyotes. I blame you for that, good sir. Peter Mrazek, unfortunately, did not get claimed off of waivers, so he is back in the saddle. And the Maple Leafs going forward with the goaltending trio of Jack Campbell, Peter Mrazek, and Eric Kallgren. How do you feel about that? Are you okay with that?
It's a little unsettling. I'm going to say that. Like, it's, you know what? It's not the worst thing in the world if they're totally confident in Jack Campbell, but it's really tough right now to be totally confident in Jack Campbell just because maybe the 2 weeks will help him. Maybe it won't. We don't know. Like, that's the great unknown going on right now. And I would not be surprised if a lot of Leafs fans feel uneasy because even myself, I'm a little uneasy about it.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the goaltending that we've been provided for the last 2, 3, almost 4 months. I guess you could even look at it, and it hasn't been great. Has not been great from Jack Campbell and Peter Mrazek. He had a couple of good starts from Kallgren last week, and then the dust kind of started to wear off on, or the pixie dust started to wear off on that magical run, I guess, when they lost to Nashville. And then you saw this Harry Sateri signing. Thought, oh, maybe he could do something, but he ended up getting claimed off of waivers by Arizona. So now this is it. It's Jack Campbell, and it's Peter Mrazek, and it's Eric Kallgren. Those are the three goaltenders that this team is going to be going into the postseason with. Now, there were some reports out there that they were hard in on Marc-Andre Fleury. We heard about that. We talked about it yesterday. He did end up getting dealt today after what seemed like he wasn't going to go. Woke up this morning, bit of a change of heart, ended up saying, yes, I guess I'll go and try and chase something with the Minnesota Wild. So he goes there, and all of a sudden now the Maple Leafs are sitting there like, yeah, we don't see anything else that is a clear-cut upgrade. So we're not going to make a move, and they didn't make a move. I just don't know if like this is a massive gamble for Kyle Dubas, right? Like that's the biggest issue I have with it. Because if Jack Campbell does not return to at least a league average goaltender, like a 915, 914 save percentage type of goalie, this team is not going to go very far. And things will not be nice this summer. Things will get very loud this offseason if goaltending turns out to be the Achilles heel come playoff time because they neglected the position when they could do something today.
Yeah, no, like this, I think right here, this decision will make or break the rest of the year for Kyle Dubas. I really do think that he could have done whatever he wanted to the defense. He could have done whatever he wanted up front. The goaltending, I think for a lot of, they always say that coaches can get rewarded by good goaltending. They can also get fired by bad goaltending. I
Yeah.
think you can add Kyle Dubas into this conversation right now because this is the biggest gamble I think he has taken in his tenure with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, and this is a guy who traded away Mason Marchment for Dennis Mulligan, the biggest gamble of his career. Jokes. But and on a serious note, like this actually, yeah, this is a big gamble because if it doesn't work out, I mean, I don't like how does he explain himself at the year-end presser, right? How does he explain himself? But I guess what you could say if you wanted to argue and try and look at it on a positive note, they did at least improve the blue line. So why don't we go through and talk about the additions that were made to this squad as opposed to harping on the additions that weren't made to the squad. We kind of talked about it, how it's a big gamble. We're worried about it, but let's have a little bit of a glass half full approach here when it comes to the trade deadline season, I guess we could call it. And let's look all the way back to Ilya Lyubushkin. So this is what the Toronto Maple Leafs are bringing back, have brought into the fold this year. They brought in defenseman Ilya Lyubushkin from Arizona, the deal that involved Nick Ritchie. They brought in Mark Giordano last night or a couple days ago. They brought him in for, along with Colin Blackwell, a depth forward who really could play up and down the lineup, to be quite honest with you. And so they brought in three pieces to try and upgrade this team. A couple of blue liners, a top four guy, and someone who you could argue is a bottom nine player, let's say, in Colin Blackwell. Outgoing is Nick Ritchie, and it's a 2 second-round picks, a third-round pick, a conditional second-round pick, and then Alex Biega also was dealt today for future considerations. So all in all, the only like roster players that found their way off of Toronto was Nick Ritchie, and they supplemented it by adding in Ilya Lyubushkin, Mark Giordano, and Colin Blackwell. So this team on paper looks a lot better than they did a month ago by making these additions. And yes, the goaltending is certainly a massive question mark. The health of the blue line still a bit of a question mark with Jake Muzzin and when he gets back and what does he look like when he gets back. We also today got news that Rasmus Sandin has a knee injury and is going to be out for weeks and not months. And now you look at it and you say, whew, thank goodness they brought in two defensemen in Mark Giordano and Ilya Lyubushkin because that is a little bit more palatable to get. They also traded out Travis Dermott as well. Sorry, not just Nick Ritchie. Dermott also traded out, and they brought in a third round pick, which they basically used to flip in the Giordano deal. Like I feel the team is better, and there is a argument to be made that by upgrading the defense, you would hope that that will in turn allow the goaltending to be a little bit better. Are you gonna live in that stratosphere with me with a glass half full approach, or what? What are you doing? How are you going about that, Dave?
I just think, there is something to be made that if the defense in front of the goaltender is a little more stabilized, I think mentally the goalie is in a different frame of mind where he's not worrying too much about the guys in front of him and is worried more about himself. Like, let's not forget Mark Giordano, while he is 38, he's not the same Mark Giordano from years ago. Still a very steady player, and a lot of people also talk about what he brings off the ice as well. The Leafs have really valued that the last few years. They thought, when they brought in Nick Foligno would do that, Jason Spezza. The players seem to kind of gravitate towards that. So I think by adding that, it should help. And I also think that now, especially with the injury to Rasmus Sandin, that Giordano deal looks even more important for this team. And it also shifts guys down a peg too, right? You're not relying on somebody to play out of their spot, right? We don't know exactly how the D pairs are going to work until the guys come in. I would assume that's going to be Giordano and Brody off the start. And I think that would be a better pairing over a Brody Justin Hall, even though Justin Hall has been better than he was to start the year. I think by having him playing against, as a third pairing defenseman is better than having him as a second pairing defenseman.
Absolutely. So it kind of just slots guys a little bit into better situations is what it does. And Justin Hall and Jake Muzzin didn't quite work as a second pair, but could it work as a third pair, getting, lesser minutes, getting easier minutes, more sheltered, have them protected a little bit? Could that end up being a strong third pairing where it was a bit of a weak and a concerning, quite frankly, second pairing? These are questions that we're going to have to get answered between now and the end of the season before the playoffs come. And Jake Muzzin apparently now still about, I think they said he's still not ready to go. He's been practicing in a non contact jersey, but he is someone who we expect to play rather soon. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, we'll see Riley Labushkin get a run here. Giordano, you're bringing him in. You got to get him with the familiar face in TJ Brody. He played a Norris caliber with TJ Brody. And then you probably have, when healthy, is where it gets interesting what you do in the third. Is it going to be Muzzin Hall, Muzzin Sandine, Sandine Hall? What do you do there? Right? Because you've got 7 capable defensemen when healthy. You also have Timothy Liljegren out there as well. So you've got 8 capable defensemen that could play here, and that's what you need to make a long playoff run is 8, 9 guys, and the Maple Leafs made sure they went out and did that. Now the question is, can they all stay healthy? And that's the massive question mark on the blue line right now. But when you look at the collective talent, this is one of the better blue lines that we've really seen here in like the Kyle Dubas, Austin Matthews era, I suppose, since they really started to be a bona fide yearly playoff squad. So that's got to be something that needs to also make you feel a little bit better when you add in a player like Mark Giordano and what he might be able to do to transform the way that that club plays defense and the way that maybe the rest of the forwards can buy in and play some defensive play. Colin Blackwell is a solid two-way type of player. He can play defense. He can kill penalties. And hopefully, that can also help with the goaltending as well. And the rest that Jack Campbell is getting right now, when he comes back rejuvenated, we're all praying. We're all legitimately, there's a hope, a prayer, a Hail Mary. You got Kyle Dubas sitting there crossing everything he possibly can to make sure that Jack Campbell comes back and is not a sub 900 save percentage type of goalie. And I think the Maple Leafs they'll be okay. It's still going to be an absolute gauntlet in that division. But at the end of the day, I think the Maple Leafs did pretty good work. Bringing in Ilya Lyubushkin, bringing in Mark Giordano, improving the depth at the forward position as well by bringing in Colin Blackwell. I think I would have liked to see an upgrade in net. I don't know where that would have came from. We've already had these discussions. There just wasn't much out there outside of Marc-Andre Fleury, who said publicly, well, not publicly, but it has been reported publicly that he just didn't really want to come to Toronto for whatever reason. So that left them without many options. So at the end of the day, I think the Maple Leafs did okay at this deadline. And if I had to give them a grade, I want to give Kyle Dubas a B. I'll give him a B.
At first, I gave him a C when I was on the NHL Locked on Fantasy show, but then I was, it's like maybe a little bit harsh because I was thinking too much about the goaltending and the forward position and areas I would have liked for him to do. But given on what the prices were like, what he got and what he paid for it, I think a B minus is probably a more fair grade because he didn't go out and overpay for someone.
Yeah, great value on Giordano.
And he didn't and he didn't exactly, the guys they brought in aren't underwhelming players. We're not going like, we're not even sure this guy's going to even like factor in. No, these are guys. We saw what Lyubushkin's doing now. We see what Giordano has done and what he can do. And then Colin Blackwell, a lot of good things I've been hearing about him as well.
Yeah. So we'll continue to talk about all this. We'll go around the league a little bit on some of the other deals that went down today around the league. And as we do every single year, Dave, We got to go through our winners and losers of the deadline, and all that will be coming up on the show. But before we get to that, let me tell you about one of today's show sponsors, and that's betonline.net. It's that time of year again as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, betonline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Yes, that also includes some hockey. Head to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano. With me, I've got Dave Morassutti. We are your hosts of the Locked On Leafs podcast. If you are not a subscriber on YouTube, where we're currently doing a live, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. Leave a like, leave a comment. Comment below, actually. We can see comments coming up. We got Cameron. I'm going to butcher it. Cameron Corbier, something like that. I apologize. James Middleton is in here. He's left a couple of notes for us, so appreciate it. You guys can keep dropping some comments. We will get to these a little bit later in the show. Let us know your thoughts on what the Maple Leafs did. You can also drop it in the comments if you're not catching this on the live or you're just catching this on the YouTube channel, or also if you're listening via the podcast, hit us up on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck, at D_Morassutti, or also hit up Locked On Leafs at Locked On Leafs on Twitter. So the NHL trade deadline has come and gone. We already talked about what the Maple Leafs did/didn't do in today and in the last little bit. So why don't we go maybe around the league a little bit and talk about some of the other deals that went down on trade deadline day. None bigger than Marc-Andre Fleury going to the Minnesota Wild for a conditional first-round pick. I was kind of shocked to see this go down. I knew Minnie was a team that wanted him and it was a fit, but I just had already conceded to the fact that Fleury wanted to stay and that he just wasn't going to go anywhere. Wanted to finish the year out in Chicago, didn't want to have to move or move his family. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the morning, like early afternoon, we get word Marc-Andre Fleury going to the Minnesota Wild for a conditional first-round pick. And I'm like, what the heck? What? It was insane. And the conditions on that deal are the Minnesota Wild have to get to the conference final. I believe Fleury has to win 4 of the 8 games en route to getting to the conference final. So an interesting situation that developed earlier today. What does Fleury to Minnesota mean to you when you look at their playoff chances and their chance of getting out of the Western Conference?
See, the interesting thing about the Wild is in a similar way to the Leafs, they had the same goaltending concerns where they had 2 guys that were kind of dropping off in play, and I think part of the reason why Fleury said yes to going to Minnesota is who's the guy that's making the trade. That's Bill Guerin. Used to be with him in Pittsburgh. There's a relationship there. Minnesota, they're third right now in the Central Division. Nashville can easily. I actually have 2 games in hand on Nashville, so if they get on a run, they can get a little bit of separation from Nashville. But they're right in the thick of the playoff race right there. They're a pretty decent team in comparison to what they were in years past. So I think the Fleury move just kind of reinforces their belief that this team can make some damage. They got a tough road, obviously, with St. Louis and Colorado in the same division, having to go through them. So if Fleury gets Minnesota to a conference final, he will. Let's just say that first round pick will be money well spent for Minnesota. I kind of felt like that would have been a deal I would have expected the Leafs to make. Would have been that conditional second for a first. I just think Kyle Dubas didn't like that idea of paying a first, and I think he's probably more comfortable betting on Jack Campbell bouncing back than having to pay a first for a rental. But
Yeah, but if you like those conditions, if Fleury takes the Maple Leafs to the conference final, that is well worth a first round pick.
I
Just guess
think so
what that
too.
is.
I
That's
think I think a lot of people trade their firstborn son for the Leafs to get to the conference final at this rate.
That's what I mean. So like Absolutely, I think that that would have been on if that was on the table for Toronto, that would have certainly been something that he wanted to do. Clearly, Marc-Andre Fleury chose Minnesota over Toronto for whatever reason, I don't know. Maybe we'll find out one day why he didn't want to come to Toronto. But I can almost guarantee, like you saw the package that was out there for Marc-Andre Fleury last week. Like, that was a much better package than Minnesota is showing that what Minnesota paid today. So I think that, Marc-Andre Fleury wanted to go to Minnesota, and as a veteran of the league, he kinda got to handpick where he wanted to go, and that's what they did. They sent him to Mini. They get a conditional as it's a conditional second that can turn into a first if those conditions are satisfied, but we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how they end up doing, to be quite honest with you.
Th that whole
I like
situation bet
Minnesota.
that whole situation between Toronto and Chicago, though, like, that got a little spicy.
Yeah, so a couple of times actually, Kyle Dubas was asked about that first in the initial press conference. If you guys missed it, we had talked about this leak deal yesterday, I believe, on Locked On Leafs. You can go back and listen to that conversation if you would like. But details got released. Darren Dreger got the scoop of what the details would have been in a proposed Flurry and Brandon Hagel deal to Toronto, and it was for like a couple of first round picks, Nyes. I think,
Mra
Robertson and Kerfoot were involved, like, it was a
Mrazek might
big
have I think Mrazek was
Mrazek's
supposed to go
contract
the other
was
way.
also yeah, that was involved as well. It was a pretty big deal, to be quite honest with you. One that I'm glad was not true because that was a haul to pay for a pending UFA and Marc-Andre Fleury, but, he was asked about the fact that the details got leaked in today's news presser, and he was none too happy and literally said, like, "That's something you gotta ask, Kyle Davidson about," the GM of the Chicago Blackhawks. And then it was doubled down, and he was asked by Kevin Weeks of ESPN a second time. I believe we have that clip. Why don't we get that clip ready to go? Because he sounded even more frustrated the second time, and it was very short and to the point, and you could tell that he was furious that the information got leaked out.
There's so much gamesmanship around trade deadline and anytime big transactions are involved. There were some leaks out of Chicago on the Marc-Andre Fleury situation. How did that all come down? I know you're just mentioning the depth that you have at the position, but if you can kind of reiterate how that all came down.
Uh, Kevin, I think that's really something you'd have to ask Chicago. It's I've never had that in our time here, and where conversations on something that didn't happen are out a day later, and so we investigate everything at every position to try to improve and rely on the other teams to keep that confidential. So it's disappointing. But in our case, we obviously wasn't something that we were willing to do and we weren't willing to part with certain pieces. So, he's obviously a great goaltender. He's on to Minnesota, and we're going with our guys here.
Yeah, so he was not too pleased about the leakage that happened out coming out of Chicago. But honestly, I don't really blame Chicago. Who do you blame? I have a name.
Oh, ki you're thinking maybe it was the agent that put it out there?
I mean, Alan Walsh isn't necessarily a quiet fella when it comes to his clients. Let's just say that. There was a little sword photo that got tweeted out a couple of years ago.
Oh, yes, I remember
I
that.
wouldn't be surprised if that had Alan Walsh written all over it, and Kyle Davidson unfortunately had to kind of take the punch on that one. But Kyle Davidson kind of clapped back ish in his press conference when he was asked about it, and he came out and he said, well, I did hear what he had to say, but I'll keep my words with Kyle private when I speak to him next." So, oh, a little rivalry brewing between the Chicago Blackhawks and the Toronto Maple Leafs. I jokingly had this thought though, like in the weird vein of like what happened this year with Jesperi Kotkaniemi. How much of a spite douchebag move would it be for John Davidson or sorry, Kyle Davidson, the GM of the Chicago Blackhawks, who has a lot of cap space this summer, to go out and like give Rasmus Sandin a $4 million offer to bring him to Chicago as what do they call those things? Why can't I think? An offer sheet, a $4 million offer sheet on Rasmus Sandin, just to say "F you, Kyle."
Well, actually, I was gonna say, would that require them having their own first round pick? Because guess what?
Second round pick. It would be a second round
It'd be a
pick.
second rounder? Okay, because that was the thing I was gonna worry about because
They don't have.
technically they wouldn't be able to do that because they have their first round pick going to Columbus for the Seth Jones trade. But look, this is the thing. I remember actually, it's funny enough, hearing an Alan Walsh clip about how certain guys in the league don't talk to each other. They won't do deals with each other. And I'm just like, you don't want to burn bridges at all. But in Kyle Dubas's case, like deals like that get out, people are just gonna be like, "Oh, why didn't they do it?" And then some people are just like, "Thank," like you got like the half and half, right? The thank God he didn't do it, and you also get, and let's say the Leafs, they bounce in the first round, and then they're just like, "Well, then maybe they should have done that deal anyways." Like that's I think the tough part, and we know the Leafs don't like leaks. They are very much they try to keep things airtight.
Really. You don't hear about things. That's why I was surprised that the Giordano situation kind of came out, but that was I think that was Gio who may have leaked that one to a close pal from his Calgary days, but you don't hear much. Typically when you hear about a trade or a move or a signing or something done by Toronto, you usually hear about it by the Toronto Maple Leafs Twitter account themselves because they never leak. And it's always you find out based on the Twitter account or a press release of some sort. And so, even he said this is the first time that this has happened. So it didn't come from me. And that's something that like Kyle learned from Lou Lamoriello was how to keep a tight lip in your organization. And he was none too pleased that those details got out there, because I'm sure there was conversations that had to be had then with a Peter Mrazek or with the Matthew Nyes or the players that were involved that they were apparently ready to move on from, ready to trade to bring in Marc Andre Fleury, and none of it ended up coming through, and he ends up in Minnesota for a rather pretty good price, a conditional second round pick that could become a first if they make it to the conference final. All right, couple other trades that kind of stood out to me. You let me know if there's a couple more that you saw that you want to discuss quickly. I thought when I look at a couple of moves that the Rangers made, adding Andrew Kopp and Tyler Mott, while also adding Frank Petrano earlier in the year or earlier in the week, and they also got Justin Braun today. They made a bunch of moves to go out and do that. But the Andrew Kopp deal specifically, Andrew Kopp basically got more of a return than Marc Andre Fleury. I was not anticipating a first round pick for Andrew Kopp, but he's another one where it's a conditional second that could turn into a first.
I think right what the Winnipeg Jets did well there is they took advantage of a real lack of you know guys that can fit near like the middle of the lineup and be an impact player, right? There weren't many of those out there or teams willing to part with them. Like that's a good haul for Winnipeg to get considering they had a really hard time signing Andrew Copp to an extension. They tried. It didn't happen. Even the Tyler Mott one, I think that was Vancouver also realizing a similar thing where they were kind of half and half out of whether they were going to contend this year, and they don't want to lose the chance to gain assets. Um, I just also think with the Rangers, it's like they got to hope that Igor Shesterkin can continue this because they're kind of that's what they're betting on a little bit there. Sure, Andrew Kopp's going to help out, and maybe on that second line is where he'll likely stand out. But
By getting guys like Kopp and Mott and Braun and Vetrano, you are adding to the depth,
yeah,
and you're getting guys who play good in their own end, which has been kind of the issue for the Rangers. So they're kind of by making these moves, um, helping out Shesterkin. So hopefully he doesn't
okay.
have to be, 2003 JS Jaguar for this team to have any success.
Boy, that's a throwback, but very true. Like Shesterkin is right now among the favorites to win the Hart for good reason. Like, we
Right.
haven't seen a goaltending performance like this in a while. Yeah, and like I like the ability to add depth because in the playoffs you don't know when an injury is going to happen. Guys are going to have to be able to move, around in the lineup. That's what an Andrew Kopp can do. You know, even like a Justin Braun, like New York's got a pretty decent blue line, so they just need to give themselves some insurance, right? And I think there's a real chance for them in the Metro. Like the Metro division isn't as tough, in my opinion, as the Atlantic division. So I can understand why they did it. And if we're talking about trades that happen, that's why I kind of think Pittsburgh getting Rickard Raquel is kind of a bit of a response there from Pittsburgh, because this is a guy who I think kind of fell off a little bit the last few years, but he improved significantly this season. He's always a guy that you can count on for 20 goals. He would usually be good for 30 goals in his career. And I also think he's a very underrated player defensively. And we know Pittsburgh likes those versatile players. I wonder if an injury happens, they move Raquel to center. I know he hasn't played there in a little bit, but he's very capable of doing it. I really do like that move for Pittsburgh, especially after Brian Burke said on Trade Center that they weren't going to be making any big moves. Like the prices were ridiculous. It wasn't a terrible price for them to pay, considering a second round pick and three players that
Yeah.
don't necessarily move the needle for them.
I didn't think it was too much. The deal was,
I
I'm
have
just
it right
looking.
here. It
So
was
yeah, second round pick, Zach Aston Reese, Dominic Simon, and Kale Clegg. So Kale Clegg, if you think that he's going to be, a good goalie, he's just a goaltending prospect. Goalies honestly never know with, but I believe he's a second round pick of theirs a couple of years back. And Zach Aston Reese is a decent like top 9 forward in the NHL, and then you're getting a second round pick for a guy who can go and play in your top 6 and add, like you said, like a 25 goal scorer. And it's a UFA, so it might be a little bit much to give up for a pending UFA. But I mean, Pittsburgh, like you said, this is a team that really doesn't have a large window. We know that is the case. So you got to make moves when you can. And I think I agree with you that does sound like a response move to what the Rangers did today. That certainly does. And I wonder, there was another move in that division that came right down to the wire. That was Max Domi. Last second, Max Domi gets dealt to the Carolina Hurricanes. And there was some shenanigans that went on. Florida ended up taking on a majority of that contract. I think also Columbus must have took on some of
they
that
took
contract as
yeah,
well.
Columbus took half, and I think Florida took a quarter.
Columbus, let me see, from Columbus and retained 25. Yeah, so yeah, they took half and a quarter. Right. So Domi basically at a fraction of his contract ends up in Carolina. And that's another one where it's like, okay, is that a response trade? Because that was a late deal that really went right down to the wire, and they finally kind of pulled the trigger and paid the price of Aiden Prashik, who I'll be honest, I don't know who that is. Prospect of some kind. This seems like an absolute steal for Carolina to me, especially considering what his cap hit is. But nonetheless, a pretty good top 9 addition in Max Domi for Carolina as another response to what the Rangers did.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's almost similar to what happened in the Atlantic Division a few days ago, where
Mhm.
Florida kind of got things started. Tampa responded. You're. I know that you don't want to be reactionary with your deals, but you also can't just be like sitting back and watching your rivals get better while you kind of do nothing. If you have the possibility to do something and it's worthwhile, like I don't believe in making a deal for the sake of making a deal. But I also think that if you're invested on winning and competing, you have to be willing to pay the price to do that. And I think a lot of teams were realizing, the last few years, not many teams were willing to pay prices to get players. I think this year's shown no team was willing to sit back and not pay price. No, this like it was a seller's market. It was not a buyer's market at all. When you see what was paid, even for rental players versus what rental players have gone in years past.
Yeah, but there also was like some guys who didn't go that surprised me. Like the fact that even after getting that extension, I fully anticipated Jake DeBrusk to get traded, and he did not get dealt. I anticipated Phil Kessel to get moved, and he did not go. I thought that who else was out there on the Colin Miller, I thought was going to trade. Calvin DeHaan, I heard there was plenty of interest
I heard
in
about that one
DeHaan,
too.
and then that didn't end up going anywhere. He didn't get dealt. Vancouver didn't do anything outside of Tyler Mott. There was a lot of noise going on with that team all throughout the kind of trade deadline process, whether it was Besser or Garland or JT Miller or late. There was some rumblings that I heard that potentially Tanner Pearson was a guy who they were trying to deal away as well, and nothing, nothing ended up going. Zdeno Chara didn't move, and he's going to end the season on the island, not in a playoff spot. That's another one that really surprised me.
Even New Jersey didn't do anything at all, and I thought they would. Like, they're not. New Jersey's in a place where I think they still need to get assets to get better, and they got guys who are either close to UFA or at UFA status that they could have moved. Um, like, there were teams that a little surprising. I just think a lot of them were just like, if we're not getting our price, we're just not going to do anything. I think what Boston tried to do with the DeBrus situation was put themselves in a situation where, you know what, even if we don't move him now, we will move him at some point. And maybe they found a way to get him to buy into this season and say, look, if you play well, you do well in the playoffs, it's going to be a lot easier for us to trade you because there'll be a lot more suitors for Jake DeBrusk at the end of the season versus a trade deadline where getting a guy with term is not always easy because you have to think about the money now and a few years from now as well.
Yeah, exactly. A couple listener questions here for those who are watching live on YouTube. Appreciate you guys for watching live. So let's answer a couple of questions that were asked here. This is from John Luca. He says, "You think the Leafs should have made another trade?" Yeah, I think they should have made another trade. Both of us, we talked about it a little bit. You said that you're sorry you're late to work, but in the first in the first segment of the show, we talked about not making a move for a goaltender and how if this season does not go well, that's going to be the kind of black mark that everyone's going to look back on and say they had a chance to make a move, had a chance to upgrade the goaltending, and it ended up sinking them in the end. So that would be the one that I think that's the move that I would have liked. A depth defenseman, I think I would have liked as well. Just more so because of the injuries to Mrazek and Sandin. Now all of a sudden there's actually like a need for a left shot defenseman. All along it's been a right shot defenseman, and now it's like yeah, they kind of need someone to play the left if Giordano and Brody are going to play together on a pairing. Now all of a sudden you're going to have to flip either Liljegren or Hall, or maybe you play like Kivu Halme like on the left side. Like I don't know what they're gonna do come Wednesday night when they take on the Devils with both Muzzin and Sandin now out for the next little bit on the left side after trading away Travis Dermott. So I thought maybe that would have been another move that they could have made late. Kyle Dubas did trade away a defenseman in Alex Biega, and I thought maybe that was going to be them opening up a contract slot for them to bring in another player. Didn't turn out to be, but Kyle Dubas addressed that afterwards and did say, you know, we do have a couple spots that are left, and they'll probably be filled with either college free agents or their own free agents. There's been some talk about Matthew Nyes and Nick Abruzzese once the college seasons are over, them coming in and signing, and whether or not they're going to play with the Maple Leafs or play with the Marlies, both are going to make the playoffs. They want those a couple of contract slots open for those players or whatever other college free agents that might become available. So that's my answer for that question. Do you want to answer the question DeCosta says? I wonder if the Leafs asked about Chara.
Yeah, but I had that up there for a second. I went away. I don't. I think maybe the Leafs would have shown some interest in Chara. I just think that
Left shot.
yeah. And you know what? Given how how the referee, the officiating is like in the playoffs, Chara would have been an ideal player to have as just like if you need another guy to just to be rough and physical, he would have probably worked out well. I also think that
When it comes to him, though, go ahead. 'Cause you're probably about to say
I just think when it comes to older veteran players, GMs are very sensitive about making these moves because, they've some of them, especially in the Fleury situation, he didn't necessarily have full control of where he went, but Chicago gave him the power to kind of say what he wanted. And I think maybe the same goes with Chara. We know Lou Lamoriello is also a pain in the rear end to deal with at times, and I'm sure he probably was asked and he might have just flat out said, nope, not doing it. Or maybe even Chara's just like, I just want to play. I've won. I've won before. It's not. I just want to, just keep playing. I don't think he's really interested right now. Maybe in compete. I know he was with the Capitals, and I just think maybe just at this point of his career, he didn't want to be doing all these moves. And look, even moving to Canada right now, not usually in the cards for a lot of guys coming from the States as well.
Yeah, I would agree. Tell you what, for those, Corey Parrish, welcome to the chat here. He's happy about Giordano and Blackwell. Thinks that it's pretty good. He likes it, and hopefully that improves goaltending. One of the points that we were making earlier in the podcast as well. Um, Go ahead, fire out a couple of questions for us. We're going to take one more quick break. Dave, I believe you have a word from one of our show sponsors. Why don't you tell us all about is it Built Bar today?
It was. Are we going with the Monday schedule or are we
Oh,
going
it's
with the
Rock
Tuesday?
Auto. Rock
It's
Auto.
Rock Auto, yeah. So, folks, if any of you joining us today live on YouTube have never heard of Rock Auto, it is a great place for anybody that's looking to get car parts for their cars. So, what is Rock Auto? So, these guys have all the parts for your cars. I actually looked at them recently, looking to get some stuff with winter. Winter does a little bit of damage on the cars. You need to replace some things, or you just need to, make some changes, whether it's carpets or anything like that. They have all the parts. You just look for your car model. They have all the different types of models and stuff that you can look for. It's a family-owned business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you can need from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even a new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution for your car part needs. So go to rockauto.com and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On. How did you hear about us? There's a little box there. You just write that in there. You say Locked On Leaf sent you. And they have amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts you'll ever need at rockauto.com.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano. He's Dave Morassutti. You're listening to Locked On Leafs, a daily Maple Leaf centric podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The NHL trade deadline come and gone. The Maple Leafs didn't make a deal today. Well, they did. They sent Alex Biega to Nashville for future considerations, just opening up a contract slot. But yesterday was when they did their heavy work. They went out, they acquired Mark Giordano, top four defenseman, and Colin Blackwell. You can go to yesterday's podcast where we really broke down that trade with those two individuals specifically. Let's see like when you look at the winners and losers as a whole when you look at the trade deadline and we can branch out league wide. Who are a couple teams that you look at and you're like, man, they really made out like bandits, whether it's getting a high return for some players, or it's the fact that they just added a player who you think takes them over the top, or they got a steal on a trade. Like who are the teams in this year's NHL trade deadline that are in your winners circle?
Yeah, I think, when you look at the Winnipeg Jets, I think they did the right thing of selling off a guy like Andrew Kopp. I don't think they're good enough to compete in the playoffs this year. And I think it would have been disservice to that team to continue to keep Andrew Kopp around. So I like that move. I hate to say it. Also, I thought the Montreal Canadiens did well to just try to sell off as much as they could guys that,
Dude, they got a second round pick for Brett Kulak.
yeah, the Edmonton, I was going to say, the Montreal Canadiens were winners in that deal. The Edmonton Oilers, I think, are the biggest losers for today
I agree.
because they needed a goaltender. They needed defense help. They needed a lot of things, in my opinion. And they paid a second round pick for Brett Kulak. And I'm assuming then Marc-Andre Fleury was just no guy in Edmonton, because if you were willing to pay a second for Brett Kulak, I think that would have been better off, or some sort of deal like that to get a Marc-Andre Fleury, I think would have served Edmonton a lot more.
Yeah, the money was a bit of an issue, I think, when it came to that. But how much were you assuming when you saw Marc-Andre Fleury got traded to Minnesota, and then a minute later you see hearing that Capo Kakinen has been dealt in a separate move? How much did you think that it was either Toronto or Edmonton? Because I thought there's no way it's anyone but those two teams. Those are the two clubs that desperately need to address the goaltending position, who are in a buying mode. And then it turned out to be the San Jose freaking Sharks. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
I think it helped in San Jose's case that he has term. I also think Vegas would have been a good, because Vegas has even worse
Yeah.
goaltending luck right now. Right now with Robin Leonard, his injury status and where he is, and Vegas is like, if you want to talk about a team that really needs to start winning soon with what they've done, Vegas is one of those teams as well. Obviously, like Jack Eichel's not going anywhere. Alex Petrangio's not going anywhere, but they have like mortgaged a lot of their future to try to win now. So I kind of thought, yeah, the Cabo Kakin, and I was just like, all right, they trade Fleury, and then we heard Kakinen's name, he got taken off the ice, and I'm just like, okay, it looks like a team that needs a goalie is about to get one. And then, and I also thought with San Jose getting Kakinen, maybe James Reimer was going to be on the move, and then that didn't happen. And I'm like with San Jose, I'm just like, that's all you did? Like you got to retool. You just signed Thomas Hurdle to this 8-year deal, like a massive deal. Don't you want to try to get some things that you can then use as assets to get better for next year? Because you're not going to be able to keep this going for much longer, because Brent Burns isn't getting any younger. Neither is Eric Carlson. So I thought the San Jose Sharks were a little bit disappointing in that regard for me as well.
Yeah, I think, and they moved on from Jacob Middleton too, who I thought it seemed like they would get a better return, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
for him than, like, not to say that Kakinen's not a good player and a decent goaltender, but he's not like a number one. Like, he's a tandem goalie. Like, it's that's what he is. He's a tandem goaltender who can get hot, but can also get cold. Like, is what he is. I thought Middleton, there seemed to be more smoke than fire, apparently, with all the insiders talking about him throughout the week. Montreal, you talked about just the fact that they're able to squeeze out so much from their deals. They're able to get first round pick for Sherratt plus some more. They got a second round pick out of Brett Kulak. They got a second round pick and a really solid defensive prospect in Justin Barron out of Colorado for Arturi Lehkonen. So I also want to give some props out to Montreal. Tampa, they gave up a lot to go and get Brandon Hagel, and then they also went out and they acquired um, Nick Paul from Ottawa. But honestly, you look at that team now, and it's just so good. Like, they gave up a lot to get him, but now they're just so deep again, so deep. Florida, same thing. They went out, they acquired a couple of guys. Or Florida got Ben Sherratt. Sorry, yeah, Florida got Ben
Yeah.
Sherratt. That was a big one. Claude Giroux, that's a big addition to that club. Like, they did some heavy lifting there for Florida. And then Colorado, they got Josh Manson, and then they came back and they got a couple of players, Arturi Lehkonen, who we talked about already. They also picked up from San
Andrew,
Jose.
and Andrew Cogliano.
That's right, Cogliano. So I think those teams are probably like in the winner's circle for me. I'll toss Chicago in there just because of the return that they got for Brandon Hagel, which was just asinine. Like, I think it's possible that it could work out for both teams. Like, if it was anyone but Tampa, I really, really do think that I would be not high on that trade. But because it's Tampa, I got to give them the benefit of the doubt. That's probably a really good, good piece of business there for Julian Breezeball and company. Losers, though, you've got Edmonton. Well, Columbus getting nothing for Max Domi. Nothing.
Yeah, like Columbus is just like they're in one of those
The
teams where
prospect, the prospect could turn into something, I suppose. Like, they had a third round a prospect taken in the third round a couple years ago. It's basically nothing. It's a lottery ticket for a guy who is a pretty established, like, middle six player in the NHL.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like Columbus is one of those teams where, you know, they need talent. They don't they depleted themselves when they went on that one run a few years ago, and then all those guys left, and the team has been a shell of itself. It's not a very good team, in my opinion. Like anything that was not like they're not a team that's going to compete this year. So I don't understand why you're not trying to get these deals done now. Like the Max Domis, the even like a Jonas Corposalo. You don't think a team that needed a goaltender might have actually called to give you at least something for
Wow.
Jonas Corposalo?
Been
Uh,
playing very poorly, very
yeah,
poorly this year.
but teams will take that over going with an unproven like AHL goalie or in
You know, I
Arizona.
was surprised actually, like, one other goaltender that kinda got tossed out to me today that that I hadn't considered, Craig Anderson.
Oh
Surprised
yeah,
that no team gambled on bringing in Craig Anderson.
how many games has he stolen for the Sabres in the last few days?
Playing
Even
some
weeks.
great hockey.
Ask
Great hockey.
ask the Leafs right now how many games Craig Anderson stole for the Buffalo Sabres against them. Like I heard someone say that Buffalo really wanted to keep him around to kind of help this young group kind of,
Probably.
you know, go forward, but at the same time, your team's not winning anything this year. Like, yeah, as DaCosta said, he did well at the Heritage Classic, very much so. He beat the Vancouver Canucks. He beat the powerhouse Calgary Flames. He
He's he's
beat
he's he's really on one right now. He's on a heater. He's playing
he
well.
beat Vegas too, like playoff
Surprised
teams.
nobody wanted to give him a shot, like, make a deal and bring him in. Because I mean, what does Buffalo care? He's a UFA that's probably not gonna sign there next year. Get something for him. It's a little bit of bad asset management if you're Buffalo. So I guarantee you there's a team that probably would have given him a 3rd or 4th round pick for a guy like Craig Anderson. The Leafs, that would have been a decent, like, lateral move, but at least it would have been a move, and it would have been like,
Insurance.
flying insurance, right? Like, especially after you saw um, Harry Sateri get claimed, okay, go out and
That
get
was
a.
annoying.
That was very annoying, and Arizona keeps claiming the players. I think um, Kyle Dubas spoke about that in his presser too, and he's like, "Yeah, I think it's really annoying. We do happen to have like twice as many players get claimed than anyone else, but hey, it happens. It happens. Any more losers you thought from the NHL trade deadline today?
Uh, I'm trying. I'm like it's hard to think of a lot of losers. Like Seattle, I think did well to sell off assets. They got a lot going
They did
there.
very well. They did very well. They
I
didn't get
think
as much for Giordano as I thought they would, but getting a second round pick for Jeremy Lawson last night was just astounding to me.
yeah. So like I don't know. I think if I'm looking at another, maybe Dallas, like a team, or DaCosta saying the LA Kings. I think the LA Kings. Well, they did bring in a defenseman, if I'm not mistaken. They did make one move, but like the LA Kings, I don't think they want to be going too heavy right away because they're a team that is kind of they're kind of regrouping from those early 2010s where they paid so much for that core to win, and now they're trying to bring up this younger reestablished core, right? So I thought maybe LA could have gone for something because they're in a better spot than I think many of us expect. I didn't expect them to be this good, but you
Yeah,
also don't want to you don't want to go too much too early. Like New York didn't do it a while ago. Now New York felt they were ready. I think LA is not too far from that, but you got to be careful. You got to kind of pick and choose your spots. I think maybe the other loser might have been Vegas because they didn't address the goalie spot. That was probably it.
yeah. So funny enough, like a lot of the teams that we sit here and call losers on today are ones that left the goaltending position a glaring question mark. And I'm not ready to put Toronto, I guess, as a loser, but they definitely have a glaring question mark when it comes to that. And when I look at the trade bait board, just like some of the bigger names that I guess surprisingly didn't end up getting traded, most of them did. Jake DeBrusk is one of the guys who I thought would get dealt, especially after we saw that extension come through. I figured that was some sort of sign and trade, to be honest with you. Then that didn't end up coming to fruition. Colin Miller didn't get dealt. Kelvin DeHaan, we kind of talked about a moment ago. So there are some guys here that didn't go, and I'm kind of surprised that the teams didn't capitalize on their UFA status and didn't let them go. That's kind of one of the things that surprised me when I look at those. When I look at that. All right, Dave. I think it's been a pleasure, my guy. I think we're gonna have to wrap this up. 55 minutes. We went overboard. We typically do.
For our great fans, we will definitely go overboard.
Yeah.
'Cause they're worth it. Want to thank all the guys for at least putting it. I know some of the comments were a little. I kind of looked away, but there were some good conversations there. I know a lot of people are a little nervous right now. Let's just see how it all plays out. We got about 20 games left for
Yep.
the rest of the season. Let's see what this Leafs team can do in this final stretch here before we give an indictment on the rest of the season.
Absolutely. And it kicks off tomorrow with the Maple Leafs. They'll be in against the New Jersey Devils. That'll be Wednesday night. And it sounds like both Colin Blackwell and Mark Giordano will be in the lineup for that game. So I'm excited. I can't wait. And we will preview that game tomorrow when we get back here on Locked On Leafs. We're going to have to do some more lives. This is kind of fun. Being able to interact with people live and kind of answer their questions. I think that it's we're gonna have to do these lives a little bit more often. DaCosta, agree with you, buddy. We're pumped for that game as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to the live show. That's to do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at @Canuck. Follow Dave at @D_Morassutti. And follow the show at Locked On Leafs. And also, you can follow us on YouTube as well and subscribe. That's Locked On Leafs on YouTube. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow. We'll tee up that game, that very highly anticipated game against the New Jersey Devils. Gio makes his debut, and when we chat about it, we'll see. We'll see how it goes in that game. But we'll break it all down tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.